savoring giant edible Colombian ants, hormigos culonas, drinking cortados in Buenos Aires cafes, sailing 2,700 nautical miles across the North Atlantic Ocean to study medicine in Madrid. Snippets of adventures my father fed me, along with the ants, and sips of brandy to wash them down. My father was born in Bogota, Colombia, so you might say I embraced my Latin American heritage as soon as I was able to lock my little arms around his neck and squeeze. He was a brown-eyed, black-haired man with white sideburns, light skin, and features that resembled those of a Spanish conquistador, more than an indigenous Colombian. His thick, Ricardo Montalban-esque accent was the defining feature that gave his Latin American heritage away. It also made him a target for jokes and ridicule, implying his lack of education, despite his being a doctor. I love the way he sounded, but my childhood friends looked at me puzzled when he spoke to them, imploring with their eyes for me to translate his accented English. Years earlier, in 1958, while his country was at war with itself, my father, Roberto Rodriguez, fled to North America with his first pregnant wife and my half-sister. 200,000 people would die in La Violencia, the savage 20-year civil war between the Colombian Liberal Party and the Colombian Conservative Party, and my father didn't want to be amongst them. He was a medical doctor when he arrived in New York, but unless he attended school for 4 years to obtain a license stateside, he could not practice. The only thing his broken English could do at the time was land him a job as a dishwasher. Employees at the restaurant made fun of him. He couldn't fight back because he didn't always understand what they said. At the end of his shift, with smiles on their faces, they told him, "Have a shitty day." And with a naive smile on his face, he would say, "Thank you." I didn't know my shit-thanking father. I came along 10 years later after he moved to California and married my mother. He eventually quit washing dishes and instead worked as a radiologist and finally became the chiropractor with the magic hands in Beverly Hills, treating a long list of stars like Mickey Rooney and Jacqueline Bisset. He undoubtedly is the reason I embrace so much diversity. First, there was the Filipino boyfriend who resembled a Hawaiian surfer, then the green-eyed Spaniard, the curly-locked Swiss German, the hashish-smoking French Moroccan, the blue-eyed Brit, the ponytail German, and lastly, the one I have and will embrace the longest, the Slovak-born, Czech passport-holding love of my life, Peter. It is 1976 and Peter is only 19 years old. Communism has colored his world his entire life. Gray is the predominant color, gray skies, gray buildings, gray clothes, gray temperaments. He feels the suffocation that comes with suppressing dreams and having to surrender freedoms in order to support the perceived common good. Government controls everything from the clothes he buys, to the food that's available, to the television he watches, and the words that come out of his mouth. He lives amongst people with different hearts, different minds, but the same gray life. Peter is a professional musician. He plays the guitar and the bass. Music is his mistress and his access out of the country. He confides in no one, not his mother, not his sister, not his brother, not his band leader with whom he's played with since he was 14, about his decision to defect. Anyone could be a rat. No one can be trusted. At 19, he is the youngest member of the band by at least 10 years. He sells all his musical equipment, except for one bass guitar before the trip to West Germany, where the band has been invited to play. It's a crime to defect. He lies to everyone about why he sells his stuff. He's going to buy new things in the West, he tells them, things that are unattainable in Czechoslovakia. He knows taking his money across the border is illegal. If discovered, interrogations would follow. The band would be refused border crossing, and none of them would ever be allowed to leave the country again. So he hides his 3,000 German marks, about $1,000, his hope for a new life in the drum stool. It will be 13 years before Peter is allowed to see his mother when communism finally falls in 1989. But on that February evening in 1976, he kisses her on the cheek for what he believes may be the last time in their lifetime and says goodbye. He doesn't know it then, but the look in his eyes gives him away, and as his mother watches the trombone player drive off with her son in a rusted VW Bug, her heart fills with grief. Maybe she can see his anxious fear brewing from the knowledge of how she could be punished for his actions, or the knowledge that if he was found out, he could be put into jail like countless other artists, writers, and journalists. Her mother's tuition alerts her, yet she stands wordless as he fades into the gray. She tells him years later, she knew. It's 4 a.m., 6 musicians and 1 sound man spill out of their 3-car caravan loaded with instruments. After driving for hours, they've arrived at the Rozvadov border crossing, still on Czechoslovakian soil, 300 feet from West Germany. Concrete fortifications flank their sides and loom in front of them, barbed wire watchtower, hidden landmines, and machine gun-laden guards. The snowflakes flit in the muted glow of the VW's headlights as Peter nervously watches the sea of slate-gray uniforms descend upon the cars like sharks going after a kill. Hopeful, brandishing screwdrivers, the guards open the backs of the speakers and pop off the drum heads, looking for something to implicate them. Not a word is spoken. Peter keeps his head down. He can't risk anyone seeing the terror in his eyes when they lift the drum stool with his money hidden in it out of the trunk. He lights a cigarette, inhales its acrid smoke deep into his lungs, but can't fully exhale until the guard drops the stool uninterested. Everyone's papers are scrutinized and stamped. They pile back into their cars. Relieved, they drive towards the German checkpoint. The West German guards don't seem to care who enters the country. They wave them on past the arm of the skeletal gate through a closed window. No questions, no inspections. Silence is broken by hoots and hollers of laughter as they finally cross the border. Row upon row of rainbow-wrapped chocolate bars, gummy worms, and bears greet Peter at the vivid blue and green OMV gas station. Their first stop in the West is a profusion of color and choices. In Prague, as far back as he can remember, there was only ever one blue-wrapped, silver-foiled chocolate bar. Walking into the mini-mart is like entering Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, holding the golden ticket. After driving another 9 hours, they arrive in Hanover. That evening, Peter plays his set and returns to his room, but not before he confides in 3 young German university students at the bar where he performs. They promise to help him, excited with the prospect of figuratively knocking a brick out of the communist wall. After the last gig of the tour at 4 a.m, just 2 weeks after he crossed the Czechoslovakian border, he becomes a refugee in hiding. He's granted political asylum and spends a year working in a nursing home and writing songs in Hamburg before he receives a letter from the American Fund for Czechoslovakian Refugees. Since the communist coup in 1948, they'd helped thousands of Czechoslovakians resettle. The possibility of fulfilling his lifelong dream, living in America, is impossible to resist. He flies to New York, speaking little to no English. It's cold, gray, and snowy. Do you have any jobs in Florida? He asks, hoping for a sunnier destination. After a 29-hour Greyhound bus ride, Tampa, Florida becomes his next temporary home, where he works as a dishwasher. It's sunny, but everything is too spread out and flat. It's not the America he dreams of. So, with $240 in his pocket, he goes to the airport, buys a one-way ticket for $140, and boards a plane to go west to San Francisco. He lands a job on the 52nd floor of the Bank of America building, working the night shift as a janitor. It pays the rent and gives him the freedom to be a musician. He stays in San Francisco till the summer gray fog rolls in. Again, he packs his bag, but this time into his beat-up baby blue 63 Pontiac Grand Prix he purchased for $400 and drives south to San Diego, where the sun almost always shines and where I meet him 21 years later. In 1992, a song Peter composed just a year after he defected while living in Hamburg becomes a huge hit in Latin America. His song, No Podrás, launches the singing career of Cristian Castro, a young Mexican soap opera star. It rises to number 3 on the U.S. Billboard Latin Songs chart and is an award-winning song at the first BMI Latin Awards in 1994. For 25 years, it's been covered by rock bands to solo artists and used in commercials for products like dishwashing liquid to Pepsi all over Latin America. Today, every time Peter picks up his guitar to play, I am reminded of how immigrants can rise from non-English speaking dishwashers to renowned doctors or award-winning musicians, and how our country and my own life is richer and more beautiful because of them.